the original purpose behind these progressive movements had a logical reasoning. Because like even someone who's Republican right now will look at the human rights campaign when they initially implemented, and from their current point of view would recognize, yeah, I don't care if gay people get married, they should have the right to marry each other, right? Just because they decide on what is beneficial to society, just because them who have a lot of power, a lot of money, they decide this, does that make it right? Wokeness and having a ideological score that forces corporations to do what you want is one of the most corrupt things I've ever heard, and it's right in our faces. It's not even hidden. Welcome to the Purple Political Breakdown. I am glad you are here, and I'm glad you are listening to today's podcast episode. My mission in each and every one of these episodes is to really focus on the solutions to some of the biggest questions and most controversial topics going on in our current society. I feel like most of these conversations are not truly being discussed in a more logical and respectful manner due to the political toxicity that goes on with both the left and the right, both the Democrats and the Republicans. In this podcast, I don't care about any of that. I am focused on the solutions. I'm focused on bridging gaps. If you want to join me on this journey, if you want to discuss some of the most important topics, if you are tired of the political toxicity and negativity from both sides, please support this channel, share the podcast, and go to my website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. I appreciate the support. I'll continue to make content, and hopefully we can start bridging these gaps and focusing on real issues going on in our world. Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. I am your host, Riddell Lewis. How you doing? Salutations. Today we're doing another audio-only podcast episode. This will be episode number 24, and today I want to talk about what is going on with wokeness and corporations. There is a link, and I'm going to tell you what that link means, the facts behind it, and my opinion regarding it. So this is going to be introducing stuff like CEI Scores, ESG, Larry Fink and BlackRock, George Soros, a lot of very interesting information that I feel everybody should know and get an objective opinion regarding it, and from a moderate, centrist, independent point of view. With that said, before we begin, I'm going to lay out the review for one of the recent episodes. Every time someone leaves a review on Apple Podcasts, 5-star preferably, thank you very much, I'm going to read off the review in a future episode to shout you out and show my appreciation. This is from MJ217. They said, I like what the host is creating on this podcast and adding some nuanced perspective into that conversation. Definitely one that I'm adding to my list to see how it grows and what else Riddell Lewis shares. Matt, host of the Life Shift podcast. Appreciate you, Matt. And that is what I will continue to try to do each and every week when this podcast drops Monday, 8 a.m. EST. Stop right there. Yes, this is a little mini ad. Don't skip. All I want to tell you right now is that at the end of the day, when it comes down to all the discussions I want to have, I want to be able to communicate with you, the audience. I want to be able to relay a message and receive a message from everyone and try to come up with these great solutions that I keep on talking about. So if you want to be part of the community, make sure you go to the website and sign up for not only the email list so you can get weekly emails from me for the podcast episode, informational sessions, all that great stuff, but also sign up to go on my Discord so you can be part of the discussions, debates on my live streams. So be sure to go to the website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com, and go to the email list, sign up, and go to the Discord and join the server. Now back to the episode. So a lot of very interesting things to talk about. Of course, as you can tell, I'm not having a guest on. Audio only purely will be myself, so no guests will be on for those particular episodes. And with that said, I'm not going to do an interesting fact or opinion. Well, I could do an interesting opinion. Interesting opinion for you right now. Jimmy Butler is a top 10 NBA player. Whenever this drops, hopefully this just coincides more and more with the Heat potentially beating the Celtics in the conference finals. So, interesting opinion out the way. What you need to know, what is going on in current news? Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you use eye drops, if you have eye issues, well, this is information you need to know because some people are dying or getting really, really sick from eye drops. So apparently things, they're called Care in terms of the eye drops. Care or Deslam Pharma's artificial tears have been contaminated with a drug-resistant strain of the bacteria Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which may cause severe inflammation of the cornea and in some cases infect the lungs and bloodstreams. Apparently, a couple people have died so far from this, and so this is just like an FYI to the people. Sorry about that. To the people who are listening to the episode. So if you see these two products, don't pick it up, don't buy it, and don't put it in your eyes. So let's dive into the topic at hand. We're going to be talking about so much in reference to corporate America and wokeness and their connection. First things first, this whole basis is going to be surrounded by the Corporate Inequality Index, the CEI score that was made by the Human Rights Campaign, which is known as the largest LGBTQ plus political lobbying group in the world. Now, the Human Rights Campaign isn't something that was brand new in terms of being made, and it isn't something that was originally purely for like the LGBT movement as we know it today. Originally, it was definitely one of those movements back when, America was a lot more bigoted and they were advocating for gay rights, gay marriage, stuff like that. So they've always been around trying to push these progressive ideas from a standpoint of equal opportunity, equal liberty, and equal rights for all people involved, regardless of sexual orientation and or gender identity. Now, things obviously have changed when it came to the Human Rights Campaign, but here are a few things that you need to know in reference to what this is, so you have a little bit more context on what they've done in the last, I think, since the early 1900s, mid 1900s. So they, like I said, they've been alive for years beyond years. They've done things such as help implement the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which is a hate crime act. Now, anytime someone has a conversation or debate on whether hate crimes exist in America, well, this act says it does. And it specifically is an act that is put in place to focus on hate crimes specifically. Now, I don't really understand the concept of an act where it focuses on hate crimes. Like, for example, this was initially implemented when I believe a gay couple was murdered because they were gay, obviously. So obviously it's a crime, it's murder. But what is the difference in terms of procedure versus, okay, this is a murder crime versus a hate crime murder crime, right? What is the difference? Will they get more funding because it's a hate crime? Will they act differently because it's a hate crime? I think for the most part, when it comes down to crime, it should be treated equally, regardless if it's a hate crime or not. So I don't really understand that concept. I do understand the concept of making sure something, discrimination is not allowed. So this could be argued a deterrent for discrimination. But anytime someone goes the step further in terms of when it comes to murder, for example, hate crime or not, they were a scumbag anyway. So my thing about it is whether or not this really tries to separate distinctions between normal crime and hate crimes. And in the situations where like someone is assaulted and they're beat up, not killed, right? They're beat up a little bit. Or no, let me give a better example. There were like punched once in the face. And sure, that could be a crime in terms of assault, but for the most part, people won't care. But if someone punches someone in the face because someone is gay or black, will they get a more severe punishment? That is my big question regarding the implementation from that act and the logistics of how it will work. But I'm not going to automatically dismiss it because I do think, in a way, a deterrent to all the racists and bigots out there is appropriate. It just depends on how far you want to go with it, is the question and the kind of discussion points revolving around it, right? So moving forward, when it comes to the Human Rights Campaign, they also implemented something called the Healthcare Equality Index. So not only do they have the CEI index, but they also have other scales of measurements in terms of a rating score for corporations. Now, this is for mostly hospitals. It really goes over patient and employment non-discrimination policies, employee cultural competency training. So, hey man, don't be a bigot training, basically. Hospital visitation rights for LGBT patients' families. I think that pretty much, in terms of patient visiting rights, you should never be discriminated in that situation. But obviously, it's been a problem in the past, so implementing that now is fair. So those are some of the things that they input to make sure that these hospitals are doing their jobs in terms of healthcare and equality. Because like I said, this was originally put in place for trying to get more equal rights for gay people, for lesbian people. And that were issues back in the past. Nowadays, not so much, but it definitely had a purpose initially, right? In addition to that, the lobbyists from the Human Rights Campaign worked with the Obama administration. So they've been around, and obviously they're closely tied with the Democrats for obvious reasons. There's really nothing to say beyond that. And they've been helping in a lot of these situations and referencing gay rights, LGBTQ rights. I'm just kind of repeating myself, but I want to make something very, very known, is that just because they're advocating for these progressive ideas, no matter how far they go, the original purpose behind these progressive movements had a logical reasoning. Because like even someone who's Republican right now will look at the Human Rights Campaign when they initially implemented, and from their current point of view would recognize, yeah, I don't care if gay people get married, they should have the right to marry each other, right? I think for the most part, a normal Republican who's not on the extreme would be like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's, who cares, right? So that's why I keep on reiterating, because I think that's a point important to note, is that sometimes when it comes to these progressive movements, they have an initial cause that is very understandable, and sometimes it's not understandable in the moment, but you can definitely see the potential behind it moving forward in the future. But when it comes to humans and things that is not tested and things that are theoretical and things that are based on ideology and emotion instead of logic and fact, sometimes that can go to a space that you can never return from. So you should always keep in mind that this could be in the benefit for like humans, but this also could be the detriment of humans if gone too far, because there's no such thing as a completely full on leash. Like the leash goes to a certain extent, and sometimes we gotta pull it back, and that's technically what the conservatives are for, right? To make sure we're pulling it back at least a little bit. Now it's no, we gotta keep going, and conservatives not, no, we gotta pull all the way back. It's like extreme is like, most people are like, bro, y'all need to chill. And that's what I'm here to say. Y'all need to chill. A few other things for the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, is that they lobbied extensively for the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law, which barred gay and lesbian people from serving openly in the United States military. I guess that's really fair, because when it comes down to it, like I said, in the past, the discrimination for gay people were there. Obviously, it was there. And for the most part, it's none of anybody's business whether or not you're attracted to a man or a woman, if we're being completely honest. Now, if someone asks me, I'm like, yeah, I like women, I don't care, but it's inherently none of your business, and we don't want violent action caused based on some personal preference. So you understand why a lot of these things were implemented. Now, as of recently, they did file a lawsuit in both the state and federal courts contesting the transgender sports ban law in Florida in 2021. So they tried to block it. Obviously, for the most part, I don't think this went through all the way. I may be wrong regarding this, but they're still advocating for these things. Now that we're talking about the LGBT, transgender stuff, and the woke stuff, now the question is the Human Rights Campaign going too far? Are they getting a little too deep in their progressive ideology? And that is currently the question that should be asked. Now, the Human Rights Campaign is very much funded, in addition to the CEI score, very much funded from a very, 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 very rich individual. And his name is George Soros. Now, if you hear the name George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, if you hear it from a conservative or a Republican, obviously there will be disdain from their side. Now, I don't know inherent, like, maybe conspiracies that, like, evil things he may do, or, like, if he's, like, a Jeffrey Epstein or something like that. I don't know if any of that, any of those type of conspiracies. I'm just throwing that out there to say, is there a reason inherently why he's super, 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 super evil, right? From what I research, I haven't found anything explicitly. The big problem with George Soros for a lot of, like, conservatives and Republicans is the fact that, obviously, he's a billionaire. More specifically, he's a Hungarian Jewish billionaire, so he was Jewish in the time of World War II, so he's been through a lot, who mostly advocates and funds progressive and democratic ideas. So if you have someone like George Soros, who's a capitalist, who puts so much money in lobbying and these political agendas, as a Republican, obviously you'd be very upset about it because he's a very rich man who has a hand in politics. You never want very, very wealthy people having their hand in politics. So you can understand why some people would be upset about that. But to talk about George Soros a little bit, as I said, he's Hungarian and Jewish. He's been through the World War II era. He's apparently was very much in place of, like, the British, like, there's a British bank collapse, and due to that situation, apparently he made like $1 billion in crux of that whole scenario going down, became very rich, and then started his own foundation. And he mostly funds like civil justice, social justice movements all across the country with his Open Society Foundation. Being the fact that he went through such a discriminatory period with World War II, you can understand why someone in that retrospect would be so much in for social justice movements, right? Especially since he's such an old man. It makes sense. You wouldn't be, a Republican. Like, I've been through World War II and I'm Jewish. Now I'm a Republican. Like, more often than not, they'll be like progressive and Democrat. I'm just talking from generality. So I don't blame the movement from existing. I don't blame George Soros for advocating for the movements that he thinks are just. Again, my biggest issue is, when do we pull the leash? When do we have the conversation of, okay, you're going too far? So a lot of the criticisms from the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, is the current movements that they're trying to advocate for, and do they make sense in terms of the human rights aspect? Are they going too far with that? Another criticism is George Soros not only being exclusively an advocate for social justice and progressive movements, but also being a billionaire who has such a strong hand in politics. These are some criticisms, some legitimate and valid, that should be discussed. Now, let's go into the Corporate Equality Index a little bit more. Those are the people who founded it. Those are the people who created the score. Those are the people funding it. What is CIE, Corporate Equality Index? What is it? So, for a couple things that you need to know is that this is a score that in which you can receive 100 points, and the 100 points are based off each corporation's ability to be inclusive. And there's 5 criteria that I'll go over, and the goal is to be having a perfect high score with like 100 points, right? When you do that, you receive the title of Best Place to Work for LGBTQ equalities. 15 of the top 20 ranked Fortune 500 companies received this perfect rating, including Walmart, Apple, Amazon, other companies like Nike, Bud Light, in terms of you've seen a lot of the things they've been doing recently, are also very much a part of this kind of situation and also want a high wokeness score, basically. I'm going to call it a wokeness score because that's what it is. It's a wokeness score. So they all want to receive 100 points. Why they want to receive 100 points, I'll go over later because it kind of goes hand in hand with another important point that I'll bring up in referencing the bigger picture. But there's a legitimate reason why all these corporations want a high score. They want a perfect score. So what are the criteria? What are the 5 things that each corporation has to adhere to receive this perfect score? Well, the woke rating, as follows, starts off with the workforce protections, where you can receive 5 possible points. And I will list it whether or not I agree that's legitimate or not, of course. So this means no discrimination for employment for sexual orientation or gender identity. I think this is fine. The fact that it's 5 points, I'll talk about that in a second for a reason. But I think this is fine. This makes sense. This is perfectly reasonable. You'd never want to discriminate based off, okay, I'm gay, so what? Okay, I'm transgender, so what? Whether or not you agree with their way of life, to kind of dismiss their ability to work because of it is ridiculous. At the end of the day, it's ridiculous. So this makes sense. It's valid. Inclusive benefits, 50 points possible. Criteria here includes providing health care for sex couples, same-sex couples, right? So this one's interesting because it's mostly saying same-sex couples, but I'm guessing it's just like all like LGBTQ couples or whatever. This is 50 points. This is really important. It goes hand in hand with the stuff I talked about earlier with healthcare and not having healthcare as a gay couple and how that was a big issue back then. So they want to make sure all couples get it. Now, the question is, how far does this go? Does it mean, okay, when you say healthcare, is it, okay, the HIV stuff, the AIDS stuff, does it also include the trans stuff? Because at that point, I'm curious, are they obligating these corporations to provide healthcare for people to transition if they want to? So basically, these corporations are inherently paying for people to transition. I'm curious about that. I don't know if that's a fact by any means, but it's at the very least something I would ask in terms of a question. Number 3, supporting an inclusive culture, including gender-neutral dress codes and trans-inclusive restroom/facilities policies. Now, I do want to ask the extent for this as well. Inherently, who cares what you dress as long as it's not inappropriate? But sometimes when it comes down to a lot of the LGBT stuff, sometimes they can borderline inappropriate. So as long as we don't cross the inappropriate line, I agree. If you want to wear pants, if you want to wear a skirt, who cares at the end of the day, right? As for the trans-inclusive restroom and facilities policy, is it saying that, okay, any person who's trans can go into a woman's or man's bathroom? Or do they have a trans-specific bathroom? I would want clarification on that. For the most part, I'm 50-50 on 3. I'm mostly in agreement with 2, but I just need some clarification on a few things. Number 4, corporate social responsibility, 20 points possible. Marketing or advertising to LGBTQ consumers, which would include Nike and Bud Light's use of transgender spokesperson Dylan Mulvaney. Now this one I 100% disagree. I think this is actually such a stupid thing to put in terms of your scoring. They're basically forcing corporations to market and advertise LGBTQ agendas. Now, I'm not inherently against LGBTQ agendas by any means, but to force corporations to push these agendas is very manipulative. This is how you manipulate the people. Marketing and advertising is huge. We know this. But when it comes down to its long-term effects, This is going to have the biggest long-term effect. The more and more you put it in front of people and people's faces, the more and more they accept this as reality. So in this situation, it is manipulating the populace to think a certain way and to normalize a certain type of agenda. I don't think a political lobbying group, should have this type of influence in terms of marketing and advertising. I don't think corporations as a whole should have this solidified a way of manipulating people. I would 100% be willing to go into anything that you may put in place and saying, okay, are they collectively manipulating the people to think a certain type of ideology? And I would be willing to have that argument if that's legitimate or not. We wouldn't want corporations to kind of go like okay, this is how I put this, because I'm kind of stumbling on my words, but I'm going to make sure I'm making sense when I say this. If you're a big liberal or lefty or progressive, right? Would you like it if all these corporations were shoving Christian stuff in your face? Because a lot of you hate Christianity. A lot of you hate religion. So would you want corporation after corporation after corporation being forced to put all this religion stuff in your face? All of it. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't like it. You would disdain it. So this is very sketchy. This is probably the sketchiest thing in reference to this wokeness score. Do you want a great website like this? This is my podcast website where I direct the audience to come to watch the content, listen to the content, read the blogs, and much, much more. If you want to have your own customizable podcast website, then join my affiliate link in my description to sign up for something called Podpage, and they can help you customize an easy podcast website for your personal podcast. Sign up to get a discount now. Again, use the link in my description to join Podpage now. In the way that they force corporations to market and advertise LGBTQ agendas on their behalf. That is very sketchy. And number 5, you can lose 25 points. Points deducted if a company gives money to organizations whose primary mission includes advocacy against LGBTQ equality, which is not defined but could include Christian groups. Again, this is another to what extent. What qualifies an adversarial against LGBTQ groups? I would need some clarification on that. So as you can see, there's a lot of things there and very few things I inherently disagree with. Very few things I disagree with outright, except number 4. I 100% disagree with everything that is associated with the 4th wokeness rating. That is extremely sketchy. And the reason why I'm saying the words force, the reason why I'm saying they have to, is for a legitimate reason. These corporations are not getting perfect scores because they want to be the social justice warrior of the year. They want to be enlightened. They want to care about these groups. No, inherently, these corporations don't care, but they can't say no. Why can't they say no? Well, the CEI is very much a part of something known as the ESG, Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance, which is a movement pushed by the country's top 3 investment firms, i.e. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street Bank. Now, these movements have some legit. I'm not saying ESG is inherently bad. That is not what I'm saying at all. Very progressive, but some things are legitimate. They oppose fossil fuels. There's the argument of fossil fuels can definitely be argued. They push for unionization. That one's interesting. Stress racial and gender equality or equity and equality. So, very legitimate things that they're saying. But ESG, running by the three most powerful corporate firms, most powerful organizations in the world, is red flags all over. Now, BlackRock is ran by a specific individual because he's kind of like the spearhead of all of this. Ran by CEO Larry Fink. Now, if you don't know who Larry Fink is and you don't know what BlackRock is, I highly recommend checking out Jake Tran's video on what is BlackRock. But for the most part, he was an individual that has a hand in most businesses in terms of stakes and investing. He's the guy that the government calls when they're in very, very, very pivotal financial situations. He's a very smart guy, very, very wealthy guy. And his company, in addition to the two other companies, have a lot of power. Now, he does indicate sometimes that, okay, inherently the ESG is not political. But that's interesting that he says this. Because a couple quotes that he says is that society is demanding that companies, and if you're hearing like lawnmowers in the background, I do apologize. For some reason, people want to mow the lawn at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Interesting. He does say society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. To prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. So he completely believes in the aspect that these corporations with so much power should do whatever it takes to benefit society. But the question is, just because they decide on what is beneficial to society, just because them who have a lot of power, a lot of money, they decide this, does that make it right? You're giving the crux of the progressive movement behind 3 corporations, behind 3 CEOs, behind some stakeholders. It should be a collective agreement based on all society and how humanity should push forward. Not a couple very, 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 very rich white guys, you know what I'm saying? No, I just want to be progressive a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Even though the progressives are ran basically by rich white guys. Funny. I know, crazy. So, he says this, it coincides with a lot of the things he's doing with ESG and CEI at the end of the day. But then he says he denies it's political, despite key staff managing his ESG operations. They worked in the Obama administration. They donated to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. So they actually do have a hand in politics. Now, DeSantis actually tried to push back. He tried to pull, Florida as the state, tried to pull $2 billion worth of state assets managed by BlackRock. Because like I said, these corporations, they're investment firms. They control lots of money. This DeSantis was like, this is his quote: "I think it's undemocratic of the major asset managers to use their power to influence societal outcomes." And I'm not a Republican, but I agree wholeheartedly when it comes to small number of people having this much influence on things going on in America. Another political situation that happened. In his first veto, President Joe Biden last month rejected a GOP-backed bill that sought to block ESG investing, especially in pension funds, where critics say American retirement funds will be sacrificed to a radical left-wing agenda. So again, when ESG is involved, Biden was like, we can't do that to ESG. We can't do that. He said, we can't do that to ESG. And another situation regarding BlackRock, which is not like inherently political, but it's interesting to kind of give you the perception that not everybody likes BlackRock now. Protesters in Paris actually targeted BlackRock's office there This couple weeks ago, I don't think it's a couple weeks ago. I think it's weeks ago. I think this article was either this year or last year. Due to the company's role in managing and privatizing pensions, which are at the heart of the French government's recent retirement age reforms, which I believe I remember this protest and this whole thing. I think that might have been early this year or late last year. I don't completely remember. But as you can see, when it comes down to it, there's problems. There's problems here. BlackRock, which is owned by Fink, and two other big firms that are comparable to BlackRock, push this movement, this huge organization or group called ESG. And ESG, one of the parts of ESG is the CEI, the Corporate Equality Index, which is not only ran by the ESG and backed by the ESG, but it's also funded by billionaire George Soros and the Open Society Foundation and pushed through the Human Rights Campaign, a LGBT political lobbying group. That is a lot of influence. That is a lot of power. So the way that the CEI score forces corporations to adhere to this woke index is through the influence of ESG, through the influence of BlackRock and the other large corporations, large investment firms, large corporations that own stakes in basically all businesses that we know of. Amazon, Nike, Apple, you could think of, they have stakes in it. So, the reason why they are so scared is that if a company doesn't engage with the community and have a sense of purpose, this is something that someone said about it, it will ultimately lose the license to operate from key stakeholders. Another thing that was said, the big fund managers like BlackRock all embrace this ESG orthodoxy and how they apply pressure to top corporate management teams and boards, and they determine in many cases executive compensation and bonuses who gets reelected or reappointed to boards. Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy said, who's running for president as a Republican and authored Woke Incorporation, Inside America's Social Injustice Scam, told the Post. They can make it very difficult for you if you don't abide by their agendas. So obviously that's from the perspective of a Republican, so you can understand his biases. But you understand where the fear comes from. The fear comes from not the Human Rights Campaign, not George Soros, not even the score itself. It comes from the person backing the score, the person who holds a majority share in every corporation that exists in America. It comes from the people who have an enormous amount of influence to everything that goes on for America and all these different corporations. That is where the fear comes from. And not only do these large firms have influence on these corporations, but like I said, they have a hand in politics as well. So all these corporations want to adhere to, okay, this is backed by them, I kind of have to do it, so I'm going to get a perfect score. And the CEI Human Rights Campaign know this. Matter of fact, they send a representative to each of these corporations, and this representative tells them exactly what they have to do to get a 100% score. So this campaign knows this wokeness rating and where the power comes from, so they easily influence each and every corporation to adhere to their way of life. I'm going to repeat again. I have no issue with the LGBTQ community. I have no issue with progressive ideologies because I think a lot of them are very, very legitimate to prosper in humanity. What I have issue with is the influence that a select few and an ideology is having on corporate America and capitalism. It's really playing onto the fact that It's crazy because a lot of these progressives and wokies used to say, "Oh, we don't want these corporations taking over America and all that blue blah blah." But they're doing the exact thing that they never wanted to happen in the first place. They always complain about the patriarchy. They always complain about white supremacy. They always complain about the corruption in these large, powerful institutions. But those very same institutions have so much power. The strongest and most powerful institutions are, in fact, backing their ideology. It's always hard to have a separation between like the economic side and the political side. I get that. But now we're letting our ideologies go so far to influencing the people this much. Social media is already bad enough in terms of how much like large corporations and even content creators can influence a large number of people. Social media is already bad at that. But now they can go farther with that. They can influence social media, corporations, every store you go to. And maybe it will even reach the point where they'll be able to influence other content creators. They're able to influence politicians. We just need to make sure we have something in place to not allow these large firms and organizations to just do what they want based on their own personal social compass. Because what to say that, Fink doesn't turn into a scumbag? Or what to say the next person after Fink was like, you know what, screw it, I hate all of this, so I'm going to have a new movement that is completely different. That's maybe, let's make it really Nazi. Let's bring the Nazi back. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. That is very radical in terms of a shift. And you could argue a lot of the stakeholders wouldn't like that either. But the point is you're letting a select few individuals have way too much influence. We shouldn't have a wokeness score. That should not exist in corporate America. Wokeness and having a ideological score that forces corporations to do what you want is one of the most corrupt things I've ever heard, and it's right in our faces. It's not even hidden. It's like in your face, and you're saying okay and shaking your head. That's control, ladies and gentlemen. That is control. I don't even think some Democrats and people on the left will agree with that, because I think some of them who are smart enough to realize, yeah, that might be going a little too far. Might be. They probably have their hand in Canada. Canada is tripping. I'm just saying. But hey, if these corporations, if these firms want to make a real difference, there's a huge problem with the shrinking middle class. There's a huge problem with poor people getting poorer. There's a huge problem with black people in unfortunate communities and a lot of the public institutions inside and public education institutions over there. There's a lot of problem in terms of, how cops, police departments are ran, in terms of their inefficiencies, because I stand by it. This is a point I will always make. There should be no means a fat cop. Fat cops shouldn't exist. I stand by that. And we shouldn't have public education institutions that are in shambles. So I don't know. I feel like there's more important things, more legitimate things with the prison systems, with public education, with so much things that could be fixed. But no, you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to create a wokeness score and force corporations to do advertisements about trans people. That's what I'm going to do instead. That is my solution. It's insane to me. But, it is what it is. I think more people should at the very least know what's going on. And referencing the CEI and the wokeness score and how problematic it really is. And maybe you will kind of think twice in referencing how these corporations are handling themselves. Hey, at the very least, if you see a bill put in place and telling all these firms to back off and let us handle politics, you might want to vote for it. Are you enjoying today's podcast episode? I really hope you do. And I really hope you enjoy the fact that I have an amazing guest talking with me and having this great discussion. If you, as an individual, personally have your own podcast and maybe you want to have great guests on your podcast as well, I got a deal for you. In my description, there is a link to something called Podmatch. Make sure to join that link through my affiliate link so you can sign up to get matched up with other podcast hosts and podcast guests so you make sure you are never missing an episode without a productive guest to have an amazing conversation with. Podmatch is similar to any other kind of matching site for the most part, and it's super easy to use. Just $6 a month and you can have a guest for each and every podcast episode that is tailored to your specific topic. So again, join the link in my description and join Podmatch now. You may want to vote for it. Well, let me know what you guys think, of course, and rate it 5 stars if you agree, disagree. And hope you guys enjoy. That said, y'all have a good one. Back next Monday, 8 a.m. EST. Take care and peace.